gotta go. Okay, all right. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and honorable members of the committee. My name is Neil Kelly. I'm the Registrar of Voters for Orange County, California, and I am also the president of our statewide association of clerks and election officials. And thank you for having us today.
Sure.
I want to start off by mentioning a moment in time, a date, and that is July 13th, 2010. This is the date that Microsoft stopped supporting Windows 2000. No further system updates, security patches, or support of any kind is available after that date. And yet part of our voting system in Orange County was federally certified to use Windows 2000 because it was certified in 2003. So what do? We continue to source a diminishing supply of laptops to ensure that we have backup systems, but this is not sustainable. These piecemeal systems are not unique to Orange County. Counties across the state are sitting on systems they can't use. These systems were decertified for use in 2007, so even if they could utilize the systems again, they face the same technology issues that I have described. So we have two main components in Orange County that we use to operate elections. The first is our voting system, all of the components used to capture and tally an individual's voters' vote, and an election management system, which is a complex organization of many components used to manage registered voter records and data. When we deploy on election day, we utilize 24,000 pieces of equipment to about 1,300 polling places. So we've done an extensive analysis on our current system, and I feel that we will be able to operate, much like Secretary Padilla alluded to, through the 2016 presidential cycle. However, we will need to begin the process of replacing our system in 2017 prior to the 2018 elections. So there's some interesting trends in our voting system components, which I thought you might be interested in. First, in 2007, which you're seeing on the screen here, the vast majority of parts replacement focused on the motherboards, which are the electronic hub of each voting booth. And I should mention also that we're one of the few counties in California that uses a fully deployed electronic system on election day. So that's somewhat unique to us. However, if you fast forward here to 2014, you can see that the main components that need replacing are feed motors that advance the paper ballot backups. I'm really getting in the weeds for a second. So why is it important? Well, it clearly shows that the moving mechanisms are failing at a much higher rate now due to wear and tear. And the danger is that many of these parts are no longer being manufactured, so we must rely on existing inventories. So through our analysis, we've determined that we must be ready with a new system in 2018. If we were to replace our current system with current technology for our 1,300 polling places, it's estimated that we would need to spend about $30 million to do so in Orange County alone. That does not include the required refresh of our mailing equipment or our election management system. We've utilized strategic financial planning in the county since 2013 for the anticipated replacement. However, with no federal or state funds to assist us, this impacts the general fund directly in the county and increases the burden on vital programs in other county agencies. So as the president of our statewide association, I can assure you that all 58 counties would benefit from assistance through a funding mechanism. In fact, to drive home the point, there are a vast number of counties throughout the state that have no plans to immediately upgrade their systems due to a lack of funding. By easing the financial burden on the counties, we can work to ensure that the risk of an impending electoral crisis is reduced. So as we survey the landscape of technology, one thing is clear certainly to me, that many systems are being designed to handle larger volumes of voters, easy to use with technology that mirrors devices that we use in our everyday lives. They're ideal for large service centers such as the model in Colorado. To be sure, our voters, despite income, ethnicity, education, and location, have been abandoning local polling places for the past decade.
These are statewide numbers?
Those are for Orange County.
For Orange County, right?
Yes, sir. And you can see if you start on the left there, polling place voting was dramatically the #1 choice of voters in 2004, transitioned to 14, and it's almost the complete opposite now.
Do you know how this chart plays out statewide?
It's similar. We can certainly pull the data for you to look at, but I think across the board, vote-by-mail voting has surpassed polling place voting in most counties. That's certainly the case. Not all counties, but most. as my colleague from LA County would attest to. So the data is crystal clear. Our vote by mail usage is up as much as 200% in some areas since 2006, while polling place usage is down as much as 65% across the board. So how would a change in the way we vote affect our equipment replacement? So instead of purchasing equipment, let me just pull this up here. Instead of purchasing equipment to deploy to underutilized polling places at a cost of $30 million, we could invest in systems designed for vote centers, if SB 450 were to pass, at a cost of $6 to $7 million. It's a dramatic reduction of 80%. As you look at formulas to build vote centers within communities, remember that California voters, and it's not just in Orange County, on their own are shaping how many vote centers would make sense. So the electorate has been evolving, as all of us have certainly, to adjust our daily routines with the demands of daily life. Having more time to cast an in-person ballot where they choose, not where they're forced to go, like the Secretary alluded to, certainly provisional ballots, is all about choices. And I think choices is something that consumers and voters alike have been demanding in large numbers. So finally, as I start to wrap up here, I just want to be honest with all of us here in the room that certainly Congress has infused a tremendous amount of money through the Help America Vote Act in 2002 because there was a crisis at the time. We know that. The crisis was a breakdown in a system that was never really looked at closely. You looked at the outcomes of elections, but not how they were conducted until a presidential election was at stake. So is the sky falling? No, I wouldn't go that far. But the risk is elevated. And if I were to choose a color code and take a playbook from Homeland Security, I'd say that the risk is certainly elevated and approaching high. So it's something I think we need to have our attention on very much. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, well, next hear from Jill from Sacramento County Registrar of Voters, and then we'll hear from Dean, then have a discussion.
Thank you very much. Thank you, committee. I'm thankful to be here today to tell you a little bit about Sacramento County. I'm Jill Levine, and I'm the Registrar of Sacramento County, and I've worked there for over 28 years. And I actually started as a temporary worker. My first job was taking the chads off of ballots before they were counted, so you can see how long I have been there. We have about 678,000 registered voters. 60% of them are our perm vote by mail. Statewide election for Sacramento County cost about $4.5 million. And while we can bill the cities and other jurisdictions we conduct elections for, we cannot bill the state or the federal government for their share. If I could bill the state for the upcoming June election, it would be just a little over $1 million. And the federal government's share would be about $992,000. For November, the estimates for the state is $120 million. And the federal is 1.1. That is just for Sacramento County. Now, of course, that's a scheduled election. There's always those special elections where we have to replace an assembly member or senator. Those are never budgeted, and those always are paid for by the county. We're very fortunate that Sacramento County hasn't had a special election since 2010. Sorry, Southern counties. But still, that came at a cost. To replace that particular senator, it was over $1 million. And then we had the domino effect of having then to replace the assembly member that ran for the senator seat, which was another $500,000. Sacramento County has started with punch cards. We were using punch cards for over 30 years before they were decertified. In transition, we tried a ballot where we filled in the number. It didn't work too well, and we moved quickly over to the optical scan system, which we're using now. This optical scan system, of course, is one where the bubble is, and you fill in the bubble. The voter makes their choice, and then the ballot for a statewide election is usually 2 cards for Sacramento County, and they're about 21 inches long. We're talking postage here, and I'm looking at this new November election coming up. We may be up to 3 cards. I'm not sure here. We purchased this system in 2004. We use HAVA and Prop 41 money. It cost us $12 million. However, because using that the HAVA and the Prop 41 money, my county only spent $900,000 for this system. We are precinct-based county, which means we have a ballot scanner in every precinct. Voters vote their ballot, run it through a scanner to be counted, and then a card is brought back with all the results, and then they are tabulated at our office. Vote by mail is used as central counter. Voters with disabilities use the AutoMark, which can read a ballot to them in their required languages and can actually enlarge the print as necessary. This accessible machine weighs 90 pounds. Because of the system is old, we do a yearly preventive maintenance on it. And out of 1,000 scanners, 294 needed repairs. Out of 1,000 AutoMarks, 234 needed repairs before we could pass the required preventive maintenance. I'm very grateful we have certified technicians on our staff, so I didn't have to pay for the additional labor cost, but we did have to pay for some parts. And when I learned that a neighboring county was downsizing, I put my request in to have 20 units so I could have some spare parts for my next go-around. Our current system is 12 years old. The technology is from the late 90s. And we've been diligent with the software upgrades and maintenance, but you can only patch and pray for so long. Speaking of the entire voting system, we also have a return ballot envelope sorter. And we bought ours in 2006 for about $500,000. The first time out the gate, this technology saved us over 1,528 staff hours alone. We no longer were using tubs to sort ballots. However, this system is also 10 years old. And then with the increase in our vote-by-mail numbers, I need a newer, faster, bigger machine to keep up. And for this election, we will be doing double shifts in order to stay current. Also for this year, because our old central counters, they're getting old, and because I was hoping to replace them, the new version did not get certified. So I will be having to use the old counters, and they will not be able to keep up with the volume. So I am renting another old counter from the vendor, and for November, I will need to rent 2 of them. Renting each one of them is almost $8,000. So I'm planning to replace our voting system right after the 2016 elections, going out for an RFP as quick as I can. But I have 2 problems, money and certification. I put my budget in yesterday for the county. However, like everybody else, my budget comes from the county's general fund, and I have to fight for my money along with the sheriff and the Park Service and the Health and Human Service. And when you only hear of elections twice a year, only in the even years, that's not usually where they put the money. There's been no savings account set up for the new voting equipment. This will be financed through the county's fixed asset fund. But my problem is I don't even know what type of system to buy. Currently, I'm conducting a polling place election for 40% of my voters and a vote-by-mail election for the other 60%. Do I move forward and buy equipment for each of the 550 polling places? Estimated cost for that is about $8 million. Or do I move towards the Colorado model, which SB 450 has introduced, where every voter is mailed a ballot and then drop-off boxes and vote centers are opened? Under the current version of SB 450, it would be 47 vote centers for Sacramento County. The cost would be $4 million. With 60% and rising of my voters voting by mail, why do I want to invest in polling places? But I need that legislation passed. I need a certified system. I've seen the bells and whistles. I've seen the wonderful things that are out there. I've seen tablets for voters with disabilities instead of a 90-pound unit machine. But my choices right now are very limited. I need quicker, faster, and easier. And I need certification to be quicker, faster, and easier to keep up with the changes. And right now I'm following a lot of legislation, and the trend right now is to get the bills passed is to make it optional for counties. So if the bill's not mandated, it's not a fiscal bill, it gets passed. And some of these proposals are great, and they're very beneficial to the voter, and election officials do want to help. But sometimes counties cannot opt in. Right. And if you can't opt in, and the neighboring county does opt in, then where does that leave the voter? Not being treated the same. County election officials are asked to do more and more, and while many of these ideas are great, and we do want to do them, it does add up after a while. One example is our sample ballot online. Our Disability Advisory Committee said we want to make it sure it's 100% accessible. And they actually showed us why it wasn't accessible. And so we worked with our DAC committee for a year to get it up. It cost us $75,000 just to get it up, and it's an additional $39,000 every year for that contract. But we do want to serve the voters. Election officials want to serve our voters in the best way, but we need the financial support to do this. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much, Ms. Levine. Let's now move to Dean Logan from Los Angeles County.
Good afternoon, Chairman Allen and Senator Liu. It's great to see such great turnout from Los Angeles County voters at today's hearing.
Yes. Yeah.
My name is Dean Logan. I'm the Registrar Recorder County Clerk for the County of Los Angeles. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be part of today's conversation on the funding of elections administration, and I sincerely appreciate your continued focus and leadership on this important topic. An election administration process that ensures the integrity, accessibility, and security of our right to vote is a fundamental obligation of our participatory form of governing. As such, it's important that the administration of elections in our state is properly funded and supported. Traditionally, discussions around the funding of election administration have been parsed out, often with a focus of one-time expenditures for the acquisition of voting equipment, separate and apart from the operational costs and the infrastructure to support those processes. Today, I want to encourage us to approach the funding of election administration more holistically, recognizing the elements of people, process, and infrastructure. Each of these elements contributes to the overall cost of elections administration, and each is dependent on a sizable investment of public funds that are for the most part provided at the local level. History at the federal and state levels have shown that an adequate funding structure for modernizing the voting experience in California cannot solely focus on equipment and technology needs. The voter-focused or people elements like community education and engagement, adequate staffing resources and structure, and empowerment tools must be included in and funded as we consider redesigning the processes, options, facilities, and equipment used to administer elections. Failure to incorporate and address these core elements of the election administration has contributed to the decline and instability of the systems in place today and has deflated the return on investment from past funding efforts. In Los Angeles County, efforts to modernize and replace our aging voting systems and infrastructure have been stymied by a limited proprietary commercial market, regulatory instability, and the sheer demographics of a jurisdiction that serves the largest and most diverse electorate in the country. Faced with those constraints, we have engaged in a process of developing a new voter experience for the county's 4.9 million voters, a number that is expected to increase to 6 million based on implementation of AB 1461 by 2020. This new voter experience completely re-envisions the mechanics of how we vote and is being designed based first on the needs and preferences of our voters and then on the administrative impacts of our operations. To learn more about the needs and preferences, we have engaged over 3,200 voters in a human-centered design process that has included extensive user testing and prototyping. More than an equipment replacement initiative, we're looking for solutions that respond to the expectations, behaviors, and needs of our voters. Rather than replicating the traditional single-day, single-location, single-device voting model, our new voting experience design envisions an interactive sample ballot that allows for customized interaction using a voter's personal device, deployment of electronic rosters that allow for real-time updating of voter history and activity and that secure the integrity of the process, vote centers available on dates, times, and in locations that are convenient and accessible to a mobile electorate, accessible ballot marking devices serving all voters, including those with disabilities and language assistance needs, that produce human-readable and auditable paper ballots that preserve voter independence, and a new, secure, transparent, and robust ballot counting and vote tabulation system. With the proper support and regulatory framework, the implementation of this new voting experience will address an outdated, overly complex, and costly election model and replace an aging voting system that is no longer aligned with the lifestyles, preferences, and habits of Los Angeles County voters, and that increasingly makes voting inaccessible and inconvenient. To date, the research and development of this new model and the technology needed to support it has been funded through partnerships, grants, county general fund appropriations, and federal funding allocated by the Help America Vote Act. In order to fully implement and administer elections using the new model, the county will need significant support to ensure that all elements, the people, the process, and the infrastructure, are set up to ensure success. While HAVA 301 and Voting Modernization Bond Act funding is allocated and available to address the equipment and technology needs, that funding is insufficient for addressing the broader election administration, voter education and engagement, and core infrastructure needs to support the new systems. While we're breaking ground with this innovative project to re-envision the voting experience in Los Angeles County, we're not the only ones questioning whether the traditional voting model suits the needs of voters. Our research revealed recognition throughout the country that current election processes are increasingly inaccessible and inconvenient. This finding was validated in a report by the Presidential Commission on Elections Administration and in a recent study by the Brennan Center for Justice at the New York University, as referenced by Secretary Padilla. We're encouraged by the growing body of work to improve the usability and accessibility of elections, and we're working closely with the Secretary of State and the United States Elections Assistance Commission to modernize and streamline the certification and testing processes to support open source, publicly owned voting systems and an agile development model. Recent legislative initiatives that we've all heard about today, in particular, Senator Allen, your Senate Bill 450, which seeks to modify and expand voting options in California, offers the parallel regulatory framework needed to improve the voter experience and make it more accessible. It's important to recognize that these changes reinforce and influence the need to adequately fund elections administration. SB 450 seeks to empower California counties to implement a new model of elections administration that closely aligns to the work that we've been doing in Los Angeles County. The model includes vote centers, early voting, and expansion of vote by mail. While there is good indication that in the long run this new model will result in lower election administration costs, the upfront implementation costs anticipated are significant, and the more compelling outcome is found in the impact the model has on voter participation. Funds will be needed for the acquisition of new technology, equipment and infrastructure, enhancements to the state's central voter registration database, process development and training, adequate facilities, revised staffing structures, and extensive voter outreach and education. That is why, in terms of fiscal responsibility, this conversation and the hard work of detailing the best manner of rolling out that new model are critically important to the significant public investment that will be required to do it right. Once ballot marking devices, electronic rosters, and other technologies are implemented, they will need to be maintained. Software will need to be updated, depreciated hardware will need to be replaced. We cannot continue to manage voting systems outside of the larger technological ecosystem where equipment replacement and upgrades are standard business practices. Technology is evolving at a rapid pace, and our technological advancements will have a definitive lifespan. Likewise, we will need the agility to respond to changes in voter behavior over time. We as election administrators need a sustainable funding framework to update and replace voting system components as they reach the end of their lifespan. Otherwise, we will see a repeated pattern of our current condition where counties need to replace their voting systems all at the same time and under a condition of urgency. It is important that we keep exploring ways to make the voting experience more accessible, relevant, and reliable for our voters. We must ensure that the method in which we administer elections is not a barrier to voter participation, and that as the culture and behavior of civic engagement evolves, the election process responds to encourage participation and cultivate confidence. Adequately funding the administration of elections is critically important if we are to maintain the integrity and ensure the accessibility of the voting franchise. So again, I thank you and Secretary of State Padilla for your leadership and collaboration in addressing this important issue and for your unwavering support of the elections process in California.
Thank you. Thank you, Dean. Thank you to all the panelists. Let me just start with one question, and that's that I have heard very different reports, I suppose, about the costs and the savings associated with 450. I mean, I hear from Orange County an enormous drop in costs, and similarly a 50% less than what the allocation that Sacramento would have to make. And yet I'm hearing from you that the advantage is really on the voter participation side, and that there's be longer term cost savings. I'm trying to get an understanding of why there's such a difference between your various counties in that respect.
Yeah, well, first let me say, I do think that in the long term, as I said, I do think that in the long term, the 450 model saves the ongoing cost of elections administration. I think we have to recognize, though, that Los Angeles County is an anomaly in the elections community, both in California and in the nation. In Colorado, when the 60 counties converted to this model, they were already at 60 to 70% vote by mail. So they already had infrastructure in place to support that. In LA County, moving from 1.2 million vote by mail ballots to potentially 6 million vote by mail ballots is a feat that has not been ever tested or accomplished anywhere in the country. I mean, we have more voters than 32 of the 50 states as statewide entities. So it really is about the upfront investment in the infrastructure to apply that model. And we're still using not only, as Secretary Padilla referenced, a decades-old model of the voting experience, but in LA County, we're still using decades-old equipment. So the counties that have moved forward since the 2000 election and the Help America Vote Act have seen that incremental change. LA County, for the reasons I stated in my testimony, has been behind in that, and it's been stymied in that effort. So, again, as my bully pulpit is that it's time to do it, but it's going to take an investment to do it right.
Okay, and the reason, when you say the reasons you state in your testimony as to why we're so far behind on equipment, could you just sort of summarize them?
Sure. So when when the Help America Vote Act passed and Prop 41 passed to replace punch card voting systems, in that time, the market of voting systems available to meet the needs of the county just has not existed. So and that market has shrunk in the ensuing years. And in fact, we know in our neighboring counties of Riverside and San Bernardino, where that money was invested in touchscreen voting systems that was subsequently decertified, the money they invested in that replacement equipment is now paying for storage of that equipment because they can't use it. So in some ways, LA County was fortunate that we didn't use up all that money to move towards touchscreen systems. But the real answer to that is there was not a system out there that had the capacity to meet the needs of a jurisdiction our size and complexity.
Okay. And then similarly, we just haven't found a way. I mean, Orange County is not a small county. I know LA, I mean, what's your population?
3.2 million.
Okay. And so LA's what, 9.5 or 10 now? What is it? What's the?
Yeah, I think
So,
it's
and you know,
between 10 and 11 million
okay, so 10.
population.
And then of course, you know, your voting population much so it's much bigger county, but these are not small counties either. But I guess it's just enough of a difference that it's made the vote by mail implementation so much harder.
I don't know that I would characterize it as saying that the vote by mail implementation is harder. I think we issue more vote by mail ballots in LA County than any jurisdiction in the country. I think there are some complicating factors. One is our ballot style is not a particularly intuitive ballot for voting by mail. So you have to fill in the oval by corresponding to a number and guidebook. So that's outdated technology. So I don't know that it has that appeal that the OpScan ballots that the other counties have. But we also have unique situations. We have a very diverse community in all forms of diversity. So with language needs, we serve voters with 11 different languages other than English. I think that contributes to some of those communities are slower to move to vote by mail. We have lower income communities where there's a public trust issue with the U.S. postal system. We hear that feedback. You know, again, are those...
And a much slower kind of rollout before you came in.
That's what I've been told.
Yeah.
That was before me, so I wasn't here. I can tell you that we widely advertise vote by mail today.
Okay. Let me ask Ms. Levine, or you talked about the need for funding. If the state, let's just say doomsday scenario, let's say the state doesn't provide any more money, we don't permit you to use a vote center model, what would you do? What do you do? What's your plan?
I still need to replace the voting equipment. I would go to my county and we would get a loan and we would move forward with equipment for all of the polling places, but it does need to be replaced.